I'm delighted to be joined by the brilliant fantasy author, Stephen Aryan. Stephen, thank you so much for joining me today. How are you getting on?
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. Oh, yeah, getting on well. Busy, busy, lots to do as usual.
Yeah, brand new year. You've got loads coming up. You've got a new novel on the horizon.
Yes. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. New trilogy kicks off this July, 11th of July from Angry Robot Books. And I'm busy working on books one and two and three in different forms in some way, in different stages. So
Oh,
we can
nice.
talk about some of that if you want.
Definitely sounds like you're juggling a few balls there.
Yeah, it's usually the way. So even with a book coming out one a year, there's always something in different stages. So the Judas Blossom comes out in July.
Yeah,
The first draft is obviously done, and I've done my first major edit on that. I've handed in the first draft of book two at Christmas, and
nice,
here we are in January 2023, and I'm just starting to write book three in the trilogy.
nice.
But that will come out in 2025, so one a year for the next sort of 3 years, you know. But I'm already working on book three now,
Yeah.
so.
You sounds like you've been furiously drafting there then.
Well, my deadline's Christmas this 2023 for book three, so I've got time to do it. But
Yeah,
got to fit it in around everything else, like having a life and family and commitments and a job and all that kind of thing. So
yeah. I
even though it's a long way off, it still keeps me busy.
Definitely, yeah. I've been reading about the Judas Blossom and it does sound fantastic. I really love your world building anyway. And this sort of Persian inspired world,
Mm.
it sounds fantastic. I think that's a good place to start. Can you tell
Yeah,
us a bit more about it?
yeah. So I always want to do something different with every new series. I never want to repeat myself, and with this one, it was something I'd been thinking about for a while, of doing historical fiction, but it's obviously it's inspired by, because it's got fantasy elements in. It's not pure historical fiction. So historians will have a hissy fit, but that's fine because it's not supposed to be for them.
Yeah.
um, and so I just thought the book starts in the year 1260, so 13th century, and it's not a part of the world that I've seen much fantasy about. It's not an era that I've seen much fantasy about, and I haven't seen any Persian-inspired fantasy.
Okay.
And I'd done a bunch of research, I'd done a bunch of reading, I'd watched like TV shows and other things that I thought that's quite interesting. Like, there's Marco Polo is on Netflix. That was a series that ran, I think it was 2 years or something, and a
Yeah.
special, and that was very much about him in the Mongol courts of Kublai Khan. And
Yeah.
this is my story set in a similar era to that, but not in the same place. So Genghis Khan was the kind of the granddad of them all, and what he wanted to cover the world in one empire. Make the whole world the Mongol Empire. And as the years went on, he took over more and more land. Then he died. And in the time of my story, the Mongol Empire split into four. They call them khanates, four kind of territories, and each one is ruled by a different relative of Genghis Khan.
Yeah.
And this is all fact so far. This isn't fiction. This is true. So
Yeah.
the story that I'm focused on is set in Persia, and that Khanate covers parts of Iran, Iraq, a bit of Syria, a bit of Afghanistan, and kind of all those countries around there from today's kind of borders. And this area is called the Il Khanate, and it was ruled by one of Genghis Khan's grandsons for many years. And there's lots of fighting, expanding the borders, going east, going west, and they're all lots of kind of infighting. And it's a really complex part of history. There's loads of stuff going on. But the
Yeah.
problem is, years of time will go by and there'll be no huge changes. Things are happening, but it's not massively relevant for like a story. You'd have to be like, oh, now we skip 8 months and then this happens and now we skip 9 months. And so you can't do that in the world of, in a fantasy story, because people want to know what's going on. So
Yeah.
I've moved things around. I've got characters that are based upon real people. I've got fictional characters that are mixed in with there. I've got a bit of magic that I'm bringing in that's based upon
Nice.
stuff, but it's all set within Persia then, as it was called, and it's now modern day Iran.
Yeah.
And so it's about the Mongols that were occupying Persia and all the other territories, and it's about a rebellion trying to get them out. Basically, they fought a war against the Mongol invaders and they lost. The army was defeated, and that's kind of like, right, well, now what? And the people are like, well, we still don't want them here. So it's about mounting a rebellion, trying to get them out in different means instead of just a head-on conflict, because they don't have the army anymore.
Yeah.
And so I've got some facts, some fiction, and I move bits and pieces around of history. And I've got a stack of books you can't see, but behind this stack of my to read pile, there's some books there too.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to do the Dan Brown thing of like, I read 800 pages of history. Now you're going to have to sit through all of it. So I've ignored certain things. I've shaved things off. I've moved things around to make it easy to get into, because I don't want someone stumbling over too many weird terms that they're not familiar with and constantly having to flick to a glossary. Yeah. Like if I have to keep doing that on a book and you've pulled me out the story, I'm done. So I'm conscious of all of this kind of stuff and trying to make it at the same time interesting and not just, here's a history book, you know?
Yeah. That sounds fantastic. I mean, I love historical fiction, and one of the reasons why is because I feel like I'm learning something new while having following these brilliant characters. Yeah, and it sounds like you've taken that to the next level.
I mean, like people like Conan Golden does brilliant books about the Mongols, but his are much closer to kind of historical, fact, as much as his can be. But mine is definitely fantasy inspired, because there's stuff in there that obviously I've completely made up, and characters are completely made up, and then there's magic and other weird things in there creeping around. So it's telling a cohesive story by mixing these two things together, and it's the most challenging series I've ever done.
That's how you grow, though, by pushing yourself and seeing what you. So it's brilliant. And but it sounds like you had to do an awful lot of research then. So how much time did you devote to that process?
Oh, I just did it gradually. I always do it like in parallel to other things. So at the moment, I'm doing bits and pieces of notes for the next project. Like now, I'm not even going to start writing that for 12 months, but I'm doing stuff in the background. So I'm like picking up bits and pieces, making notes. And I was doing the same then. I was reading some books and flicking through things and making notes. So I've probably been technically researching it for 2 years, but that's not like, every day sitting down and writing. It's just bits and pieces.